Alright, welcome to episode 3 of the Django package review series. In this episode we're going to be reviewing the Tastypie package, and this is kind of a breath of fresh air when building APIs because we're not going to be using the Django REST framework, which is definitely the more popular package. But after recently coming across the Tastypie package, it definitely feels like that package is underutilized. And so if you're new to this series, what we do is we review Django packages. You can find them all here on djangopackages.org, or if they're not here, they'll be on GitHub. But either way, there'll be a link in the description of this video for this package. And to follow along, you just click on the branch here, and you're going to go to the number 3 Django Tastypie branch, which will have the finished code of this episode. To follow along, you can just stay on the master branch, code along with me, and by the end of it, you'll end up with the Django Tastypie branch's code. And so once you've cloned or downloaded this and you've got it in your editor of choice, then we can get started. Alright, so to find the Tastypie package, we can just search for Tasty. And here you can see Django Tastypie, so I'm just going to click on that. And so we can just go to the GitHub repository. And so you can see it has 3,600 stars, which is really a lot of stars. And if we scroll down, then you can see it says creating delicious APIs for Django apps since 2010, which is quite a long time ago. So this package has been around for quite a while, and it does have Django 3.0 support. So that's really awesome. So just to get a taste of what this package is about, if you look at this example code here, it says that this is inside the API file. And what they're doing is importing a resource, which is called a model resource. And you can create your own resource that inherits from that, similar to inheriting from a model from Django. And all we do is just give it a query set. And what this does is transforms that into something that we can then include in our URLs. So we import that resource, which in this case is the entry resource. We then create an API with a version and we register our resource, which then we can put in our URL patterns and basically have a read and write API for the entry model, which supports all the CRUD operations in a RESTful way. And so it then gives a little bit more clarity as to why you would use Tastypie. So it says here you need an API that is RESTful and uses HTTP well. You want to support deep relations, and that's a real problem in API design. You don't want to have to write your own serializer to make the output right. That's a really valid point, because if you can have the serialization done for you and done in the quote right way, that's a lot of weight off your shoulders. And then it says you want an API framework that has little magic, very flexible, and maps well to the problem domain. And you want or need XML serialization, which is treated equally to JSON. So those are some of the reasons you'd use this package. And it sounds pretty good, so let's go and install this and start building something really basic to test this out. So we'll just click on the documentation link over here to go to read the docs, and we'll go straight to getting started with Tastypie. Now, bearing in mind there's a lot of categories over here, but most likely we'll create a separate tutorial project that goes through using Tastypie a lot more in depth and comprehensive, and use it to build out an entire project so that we can cover all the concepts here, like authentication, authorization, serialization, all of those concepts. So stay tuned for another series on Tastypie. But for now, let's just go through the essentials. So let's click here to go to installation, and we can just use pip install Django Tastypie. So I'm here on the new branch, and I'm just going to activate the virtual environment and install Django Tastypie. It says here the only mandatory configuration is adding Tastypie to installed apps. So we'll go to package review settings, and inside the installed apps, add Tastypie. You have the option to set up a number of settings, and we don't need to configure any of them to get started, so that's fine. We'll just leave them as they are. Then it talks about creating resources. So in order to create a resource, we're going to have a model to work with. So for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just create another app, and we'll make it something basic like blog posts. So let's just go and say python manage.py start app blog, and let's go to blog models. We'll create a model here called a post, and we'll just give it a few fields here. So title, which we'll make a character field, make it max length 100. We'll add a description. which is, let's make it a text field. And I'm going to be really bad and use the default Django user, which you shouldn't do, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll import the get user model and just say user equals get user model. And let's make it the owner. So we'll make it a foreign key here. And there's a reason why I'm using a foreign key, so that we can later look at the depth of the API, and basically meaning whenever we have a foreign key, it then complicates the way that we want to represent this data in an API. And we'll see how we can do this using the Tastypie's resources. So I'll just say on delete is models.cascade. Let's add a string here and just say return self.title. And let's just add a couple more fields here. Let's add created. So we'll make it a date time field. I'll say auto now. Add is true. Updated is going to be a date time field as well. And we'll say auto now is true, so that we get an updated value. And let's say we'll have likes. So we'll say this is an integer field, default equals 0. And let's say active, which can be a Boolean field. Default is false, let's say. Okay, so we have that. Let's go to the admin, say from .models import post admin.site.register post, and then we can basically leave it like this. We'll just have to add this into our installed apps, so we'll add it over here. It's going to be blog. Cool, let's bring this up here, and let's just make sure we don't have anything to migrate. There we go. Okay, so Tastypie migrations were made, and let's go and run make migration so that we can get our blog model and then call migrate again. Cool, so we have all of that set up now. Now we can go and create a resource, which they do in api.py. What I'll do is create a separate file called resources.py. And in there, I'm going to copy all of that, paste this here. So we're importing the model resource. We'll import our post model in here. And then let's call this the post resource. And make this query set post.objects.all. Resource name is going to be post. And then we can hook this up in our URL. So we just need to import the resource in there and then create the entry resource. So I'll actually do this in here. I'll call this the post resource. So we're creating an instance of the post resource, and then that I'm actually just going to bring it into the base URLs, and then we can get rid of that comment. And all we do is just include the resource.urls. So here I'll say path to posts, which is going to be our resource. So we'll say from blog.resources import the post resource, and then post resource.urls. Right, so let's run the server here so that we can check if this is working. And let's see, so we've got too many names to unpack. This is because this needs to be include post resource.urls. So let's run this again. Need to import include from django.urls, and there we go. And so like that. Here it just talks about specifying the format of the request, so we can specify format JSON. And so what I'll do is I'll create a file inside here so that we can test this API out, and it's going to be doc.htdp. And this is just a file that allows us to send requests and pretty conveniently test our API. So what we can do is use a shortcut here, and I'll just say this is a GET request, and the URL that we want to query is going to be our local host, so 127.0.0.1 and then it's going to be posts. So let's just go for the post list, and I'll just add a name here. We'll say this is the post list, and if we send a request, then let's see, so we're getting a 404 not found, and I think I know why this is happening. This is because this is supposed to be API. And then if we just take a look back over here, then it tells us at this point we have a bunch of other URLs, and we can specify the format at the end of them, but we just need to take note here that you get API/entry, which is going to be a list of entry-like objects. So that's going to be /post, which will get us the post object. So let's send that request. And here we're going to get this response. So we get meta, which has some properties in it. We have the limit, next, which is for pagination, so we don't have any other pages. We're not offsetting it. We don't have a previous, and we don't have, well, we have 0 as our total count. And then objects is empty because we don't have any post objects. So that is going to give us all of our post objects. And all we had to do was create a resource, which has a resource name. Now, obviously, there are some other things that you would want to put on here, such as authentication. But again, it's just the amount of code that you're writing to get an API is really little. Then if we just take a look over here, we can query a specific post or entry in their case by adding the ID. We can put entry/schema. So let's go and test that out. I'm actually going to close these files. So we'll put post/schema like they have over here. And let's send that request. And then here we get a whole bunch of information about the resource. So starting at the top, you've got allowed HTTP methods, and I'll actually just close that. So you can send these kind of HTTP methods. The default format of the response is going to be application JSON for the content type. And then you've got all of the fields. So active is a field which has all of these properties. So you can see it's a Boolean type. You've got created, description, ID. So you get a whole breakdown of all the fields you've added in the resource. And now you can also specify what fields you want to include, but we'll get there in a second. So here it starts talking about authorization, and it says that Tastypie ships with the authorization class as set to read-only authorization. So that means that your post put delete requests are not going to work, or rather they'll return a 401 unauthorized. They will work, you just won't be able to do anything. And so to enable it, you can just add authorization on it, but it says here that it's very insecure to do this, so you wouldn't put this into production. But we'll take a look at the authentication settings in a second. But for now, let's go and add some data in the admin. So what I'm going to do is just go to the admin, and I'm going to need to create a super user here just so that we can log in. So I'll just run create super user, then we can run the server again, and I'll just log in. Right, so now if we go to posts, notice also we have Tastypie API keys over here, which is really for authentication. So let's go to posts, let's add a post and give it a user, and I'm just going to give it some data over here, make it active, and I'll just add one more. And then like that, I'll get rid of the schema here, and let's send that request again. And now inside objects, then you can see we have all of the information for our objects. So we get all the fields of our model, active, created, updated, title, description, everything's there except for the user, because you can see the owner is a foreign key, but we're not getting any owner being displayed here on the post. So let's go back over here to the tutorial, and here they run through how you can use a user resource and attach that user resource as a field on your entry resource or post resource, kind of like you would do in a serializer or a form. By adding an extra field to this class, you then get extra information put into the data of this resource. And so I'm going to go and copy the user resource here, and I'm going to go into the resources here, paste this. Now the user, we're just going to need to import. So I'll say from django.contrib.auth import get user model, and then user equals to get user model. So now we have the user, we have a resource for the user, and then we can just specify a field on our post resource, which is going to be a foreign key to the user resource. And then fields, we just need to import from Tastypie. So at the top here, I'll say from Tastypie, import fields. Now all we need to do is just add this to the API. So we import our user resource, and then they use the imported API from Tastypie to register their resources. So this is very clean. We can just take this, go into our package review URLs, and then over here, we create the API, which we just need to import from Tastypie. So from Tastypie, import API. We'll give it version 1 as the name. Then in the resource here, I'm going to say the resource, or rather user resource, equals to the user resource. And then we can just do it like this actually. We'll say from blog import resources, and then call resources dot user resource and resources dot post resource. Then this needs to be from tastypie dot API. Okay, so now our API can use our version 1 API like they're doing over here. So we can just use this .urls, then like that. Then if we send this request, we're going to get a not found error. So this needs to change to API/version1/post. So if we send this request, and let's see, we got an error here. The model has an empty attribute user. Right, that's because the user is meant to be the owner. So it's going to use the user resource, but we've called it the owner. So let's go back here, send it the request, and there we go. So now we have the owner showing up, and you can see it's not the ID of the user, it's a path to the URI of that resource. So if we wanted to get this user, then we just have to call the API on this URI. And we can go and add another request here. So let's do a get request for the users. So we'll say user list, and it's going to be version1/user. So let's send this request, and then we're going to get all the objects, which has all of the user details. So you got date joined, email, first name, ID, etc. But you can see that even the password is showing, and that's obviously not a good thing. So you'd want to restrict the fields that the resource returns, and that's what they then go through over here and limiting data and access. So at this point, you can then go and specify the fields that you want to display in this resource. So on the user, that's going to be these fields. On the post, there isn't really anything we don't want to show, so we can just keep it like that. And let's send the request. And now you can see that our user is not displaying password anymore. It's only those 5 fields that we've chosen to display in the resource. And then beyond that, you've got another property you can specify here, which are the allowed methods. So perhaps on the user resource, you'd only want get requests to be made. So you only specify the get method here. So if I were to copy this here, and let's say that this is create user, and we'll just say post, send the request, and you're going to get a deny, which just returns get, and you can see the method not allowed error there. So that is the Tastypie package in a nutshell. Again, there are a ton of things that you can go through here, and we could do an entire course on this alone. So leave a comment down below if you're very interested in seeing that. But just touching on some of the other things here, such as authentication, you can specify the type of authentication. So basic authentication, which is imported here from the Tastypie authentication. You can even specify API key authentication. So what you need to do is specify the authorization header, and then API key, and then the username, and then the API key, which is what we saw over here in the admin. So this API key. And so you've got basically all of the main concerns of an API: caching, serializing, pagination, throttling, similar things to what the Django REST framework provides. Even some built-in stuff for GeoDjango if that's something that you're working with, so working with spatial data. So this package really is awesome, mainly because it allows you to build something super quick and consistent in the way that it is designed, which is really nice, instead of having to go through that yourself manually. Now that being said, this probably isn't something that a beginner user would use because it abstracts a lot of the stuff away from you. Of course, you can go deeper into configuring it yourself, but I don't think you would learn as much about APIs and about how everything works if everything was abstracted from you. But either way, once you do learn how to build APIs from the ground up and you get better at it, then you're going to need to start building applications faster, and you'll eventually start coming back to something like this, which can help you achieve that. So definitely do check this package out. There's also something here which is the Tastypie cookbook, and that's really cool. There's a nice working tutorial that you can go through on building a full OAuth 2 API. And so if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought, and otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.